Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host,
Rona Pierce, live from Unleash US in Las Vegas. Hey everyone, we are here at Unleash 2025. I'm your guest co-host, Rona Pierce, and I'm here with Simon Taylor today. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here.
So Simon is the Senior Director of Talent and Organizational Effectiveness at Gap. And I'm so excited for this conversation that we're going to have today. So your career has been impressive. I've looked through your bio and everything. And I also noticed that you are a competitive rower.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Yeah. So how has your experience, like in elite competition, shaped the way that you approach building high-performing teams?
Yeah, it's funny because I was a rower at the University of Washington and had some success there. It wasn't until a few years later that I was able to piece together like what are those connection points, which in hindsight are so clear to me, but it wasn't for a little while. And I think, and I wrote about this a bit in my book, is what sports teams have dialed in is they have a very clear vision of what they want to accomplish. It's clear. Success or failure is usually pretty black and white. And then you've got to have a plan, a strategy. That's our corporate speak, a strategy for how you're going to accomplish that vision. And then we often talk about culture in the sports context, maybe in different words, but culture, essentially, I define it as how we work. What are the mindsets? What are the ways of working of how we're going to accomplish our strategy, AKA our plan, our workouts? How do we show up? What's the attitude? What's the mindset? And so you can see there's some really clear links in my mind that you can apply to organizations around having a clear vision. What is your plan down to the macro and micro, over the season, so to speak, the months, the weeks, the days, and then what is the culture, the ways of working of how you need to actually operate. There's a lot of other connection points I could make, but I think those are the key ones that I think translate really well to organizations. And the final thing I'll say is that I think I'll end with what I started with, which is vision. It's so important. A lot of times organizations talk about their vision statement as the sort of pie in the sky, utopian future, maybe a bit of a PR emphasis woven in there. And I think that's such a missed opportunity. I think if a vision has to be a clear future state goal, maybe it's a year out, maybe it's 3 years out. If you're Elon Musk, it's 10 years out with those master plans he does for Tesla. But what is a very clear vision for the future? Because then you're going to motivate and galvanize the organization around that.
I love that. I really do. So when you first approach or go into an organization and you're what are the first signs that you use to assess that this organization is ready for high performance?
Attitude would be the biggest one, because you can, in my mind, having the attitude, having the mindset that you can and want to change to be high performing is so key. I think what a lot of teams struggle with is a level of barnacles and inertia and sort of cultural defensiveness around this is how we do it. This is the way we do things. And I think to be a champion, you've got to think like a champion. You've got to actually have the belief that you can and will accomplish what you set out to accomplish. So all that's mindset related. Once you have the mindset, then now everything else is detail. Okay, now what's our strategy? What's our plan? How do we get the right talent? All of that stuff is within the sandbox of we can and we must win.
And is that mindset more important for leadership to have it or for the organization as a whole, or both?
Yeah, good question. I said it's really both. I think if you're in a situation where it's a little bit stagnant right now, leadership has to set the tone. I know, again, we're just pulling on the athletic context here, but for me, the coach was the one. We had a great coach, and we were surprised, we were a great team. So, we see that across many teams. The coach, the leader is so important. But of course, what the coach does is they choose the right people for the team.
Yes.
And then some people self-select out, or some people get booted out, to put it bluntly, right? Because they don't fit the mold of what the team is trying to go after, that the coach is or the leader is establishing. So leadership is so key. In my talk earlier at the conference, I was talking about how it's a quote from John Maxwell, I believe it is, everything rises or falls on leadership. And I was talking about change leadership and how do you do all that. So I really believe that leadership is so key. But it very quickly becomes both and.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that leaders have about what it really takes to have high performing teams?
Yeah, I think sometimes, and maybe, I do sit within HR, even though I sort of obviously a lot of times broach sort of HR in the business and different things. A lot of times I think leaders can get caught up, and it depends on let me preface this, it depends on the organizational size. If you're the CEO of a 20-person company, that's a different mindset of a leader, a department leader of maybe a 500-person function or team. So I'll speak generally here, but sometimes I think what people miss is just the nuts and bolts of the fundamentals of what is your vision, what is your strategy, what is your culture, aka how you need to think and act to get things done to accomplish your strategy. And then the fourth thing I'd say is, like, how do we provide abundant levels of clarity to be able to drive performance? And I think sometimes those things they're so fundamental, especially the clarity piece. But we can sometimes get caught up in all these other things that need to get done in an organization. There's so many things pulling at your attention. There's so much complexity that's just inherent in the work and leading a team, leading a company. But I'm a big fan of, like, first principles of, like, let's pare it all the way down to the core. What do you have to have in place for a team to perform, just fundamentally? And it's those things I mentioned: vision, strategy, compatible culture, and abundant levels of clarity.
How do you, because a lot of people, I think, when they hear high performance and hear us talk about these things, they think we're excluding the human side of things, the caring human side
Sure,
of things. How
sure.
do you balance that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, both are important, right? There's so much research around when employees are engaged, when their morale is high, they will perform better. There's a lot of insight around, there's that sort of, like, if you hire someone, there's the basic job they're going to do, regardless of how happy they are. And then there's what's called discretionary effort, which is like, if they're happy, if they're engaged, they're going to give more to the job.
Yes.
Not just in terms of effort, but also creativity and probably extra time and so on. So there's a lot of research linking employee engagement, happiness, morale to performance. How I think of that is that's part of your people strategy, which is in support of your business strategy. So you've got to obviously sort of care for the people in order for them to be able to care for the business. So I see it as a virtuous, symbiotic relationship in a certain sense. But meanwhile, we're driving for performance. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, and I think if I can go on a slight tangent, I think where some organizations go wrong, frankly, and again, I'm speaking generally, there'll be exceptions, is when companies start talking about, we're a family. And there has a lot of good intention because, what is a family? It's about connection. It's about, relationship. It's about support, etc. Those are good things. And I understand the intent. But what also can come with family is, if someone's not working out, what do? Well, we just stick with them. We're not going to we're going to tolerate some things because, hey, we're a family. We're united. Whereas I think of it, and I'm pulling this from Netflix, as a high performance sports team where we're working on a shared goal and there's a tremendous amount of camaraderie and connection and unity that we have as we go after that goal, but it's in the context of that goal. So it's not one or the other. I mean, the guys I rode with in college at Washington, I have the fondest memories of rowing with them and the bonding that we had. But the focus wasn't the bonding. The focus was winning nationals, but we also bonded along the way. So we can walk and chew gum.
I love how you put that. I really do.
Thank
Because
you.
it's true. A lot of people think it's an either or thing. A lot of people in HR, at least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. I loved how you explained that.
Yeah, and the truth is, if I can add in, is like everyone wants to win. Winning drives engagement. Like, I haven't heard anyone say that before.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is some revolutionary thing, but, like, to me, it's like, shouldn't we be talking about it in this way? Like, who wants to be on a losing team? Who wants to be in a company that's not performing well? And again, I get sometimes companies go through phases and you stick with it and whatnot. But guys, like, winning unites people. Like, let's win.
Yeah, but you stick through it when everyone has that common goal of wanting to win.
Exactly.
If everyone's just like, oh, then do you really want to put extra effort to make this company win?
Exactly. And now you're making me think. So what galvanizes that is, through the thick and the thin, is the vision, going back to what I started off with. So I'll just share a brief example. When I was in college, we, on the rowing team, we wanted to win the national championship, but in Pac-10s, it's now Pac-12, but back then it was Pac-10s, we lost to Stanford and Berkeley 2 weeks before nationals. And Berkeley was always a strong rival. Stanford's a strong program, but we historically had beaten Stanford, right? So that was surprising to us, and we were really deflated right before nationals. What allowed us to sort of come back from that and ultimately win the national championship 2 weeks later was that we were just fixated on the vision. And so it was sort of like, okay, we had a setback, but the big picture here is we believe we can win, and we're going to pick ourselves up and keep going.
I love that. So you've advised leaders across many different types of companies, like startups, larger companies. What's one lesson you think that applies universally, no matter what the size or type of industry?
Gosh, there's so much I think I could pull from that. One thing that's actually surprising, as a quick comment before I answer your question, is it's surprising how similar companies are, and I think this is for those out there that hire people and are looking for folks that have the exact job description from the same industry in terms of their experience. In my experience, like people, I'm talking specifically HR, is people are people. And I've worked in biotech and technology. I'm in retail right now, entertainment previously. What's consistent is people, and people are pretty similar. Yes, you have to be smart and adapt to the culture, but there's a lot of similarities. If there was one thing, gosh, Ronnie, you're really making me think here, that would apply across, I think I'd probably go to the fundamentals, not because it's exclusively the one thing, but to me, it's the most impactful. In my book, Build Smart, I talk about something that probably most people would think, why'd you put this in a book in 2024 when I wrote it? The first chapter is mission. The second chapter is values. The third one is vision. I touched on a few of those already. But my gripe, if you will, is that most companies treat those as platitudes and sort of pie in the sky, PR field, check the box activities, put it up on the wall and done. But I actually believe those are the most fundamental things that you've got to have in place, and they have tremendous potential to drive an organization's performance if you do it right. I'll share a quick example. So Patagonia, they're quite famous in this space. So their mission is to save our home planet. That literally is their purpose. Like, that shapes what they do, how they do it, who they attract, because they're very clear about their mission. There's many other companies that aren't clear on their mission. A lot of research says that most employees can't remember their mission statement or their values, which you can see the problem there. But I believe if you've got conviction around your mission, why you exist, you've got a really clear vision of where you want to get to, and you've got really strong values that shape the high-level ways of thinking and operating to drive towards the mission, then so much of the other stuff is going to start to fall in place. But if you skip those, it's a problem.
Hey everybody, Adam here from the Podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by the team at Fountain. Fountain is your full-service frontline workforce management platform. I have to tell you, Fountain's offerings are some of the most robust I've seen for any product in the space. They offer full solutions for hiring, managing, and retention. They are truly a one-stop shop focused on the frontline workforce. They also create informative content using their data. For example, they analyze a bunch of data from their fast food chains and created a trend report you could download now on their website. They also have a new ebook out called Frontline Voices. There's a lot to dive into. Certainly check it out. And you could learn more at fountain.com, linked in the show notes. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit more about your book. Why did you decide to write it?
Yeah. As you mentioned, I've worked with executives across a number of different companies, and what I've found over the years is that leaders often, with the best of intentions, recreate the wheel. They read an article on HBR or Forbes or Fortune or what have you, and lots of good content in there, but then they'll sort of try and lift and shift that and say, oh, we should do this in our team. And, the truth is, if you boil it down, every team is grappling with largely the same kinds of challenges or opportunities. And so I saw leaders constantly trying to recreate the wheel. How do we engage employees? How do we find the best talent? How do we retain well? How do we interview well? And I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be great to just write a book that sort of demystifies all that and sort of spells it out for folks in a pretty concise way with the examples and the stories, etc., but like practical, because my gripe with business books is they're often very long-winded. They take 250 pages to explain something that could be maybe said in like 30 pages. And hey, some people love reading. I'm not one of them, but like if you love reading, that's awesome, right? And they obviously sell a lot of books, and that's how the book industry works. But for me, I'm like, I want to write a book that I would read, and I haven't read a lot of books, so I won't say the number. So I haven't read a lot of haven't read a lot of books. So I wanted to write a book that could be a manual of sorts, a blueprint for leaders, and that's why I called it Build Smart, a blueprint for building a high performing organization. So that's kind of the gist of it and why I wrote it.
Cool. So for leaders who are listening, who want to start like really strengthening their team's performance, what's one action that they can take? Like simple, first thing to do.
Yeah, I'd say if, something really simple and straightforward is to focus in on clarity. And in my book, on chapter 6, I talk about 3 different kinds of clarity: goal clarity, role clarity, and operational clarity. And just to back into that a little bit, if you think about what a team is, fundamentally, a team exists because it has a purpose. And that purpose is to solve some kind of problem, right? Um, you know, make these sales, or create marketing solutions, or whatever it is, right? Keep the finances in order, if you boil it down. So the leader's goal is to ensure, again, fundamentally, to make sure that the team has the clarity they need to solve that problem. Like, that's really what it is. Again, lots of other things that are important, lots of other things vying for the attention of the leader.
Yeah.
But if you really just focus on what's critical, the critical path, if you will, for leadership, it is clarity. What do we need to do? That's the goal. Who's involved? That's the role clarity. How do we get there? Operational clarity. Who needs to connect with who? What are the key connection points to make work get work done? So I think that's something that we can sometimes lose sight of just because of the complexity of the role of a leader. And at the end of the day, if someone's clear on what they're supposed to do, who they're supposed to work with, then they're set up for success by and large. There's other things that are important too, but if you're going to focus on one thing today, tomorrow, this week, ensure that your team's got clarity. And there's a good saying I'll finish with is clarity is kindness.
Oh, yeah. So true. Is there anything that you think our listeners need to hear that I haven't asked you?
Oh, good question. Maybe one thing I'll just frame up, in case it's helpful, as leaders are thinking about their own organization, their own team, where they might focus, is in my book, as I mentioned, I wanted to lay out this blueprint for leaders to sort of demystify how organizations work, how teams work. And to do that, I identified these 4 pillars of an organization. One is direction, the other is leadership, the third is teams, and the fourth is systems. Those are the 4 sections of the book, and I go into chapters on each. The mission, vision, value, strategy, culture, that's direction. I go into these 3 principles of leadership in the leadership section, and then teams, high-performing teams, and systems, and so on. So I guess the one thing I would just say is, like, if as a leader, maybe have that as a heuristic, a sort of a framework in your mind of, okay, where's my team, where's my organization at around direction? Do they have good direction? Mission, vision, value, strategy, culture. Leadership, how am I doing? How are my peers doing? How are we doing collectively around leadership? Teams, how are our teams working? Do we have the right behaviors, the right mindsets, a good operating rhythm of how we connect and collaborate, get work done? Are people growing and developing? And then what systems do we have in place to hire people well? Organizational structure, I could go on, but that's kind of a good framework. Direction, leadership, team, systems, for leaders to be able to just keep a pulse on their organization and help direct their focus over time as they spot opportunities.
Love it. So now we are at my favorite part of any show. So I have 3 rapid fire questions, just whatever comes to mind first.
Let's do it.
So first one, what's the best piece of leadership advice that you personally live by? Not just that you give to others, but that you live by.
Walk the talk.
Tell me more.
I wasn't sure how rapid you wanted to be on this, so I'll give you the. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when you forget even about the job you're in, the role you're in, the company you're part of, at the end of the day, you want to live a life that's authentic, that you're true to who you are. You don't want to get to the end of your life and be like, yeah, I kind of faked it. Or I said this, but I really meant that. Or I said this, but really I did that. So I believe that personal integrity is so important to be able to ultimately go to sleep with yourself at the end of the night, at the end of the day, and be proud of who you are and how you're showing up, for better or for worse. And there is a cost sometimes to that. But I think ultimately that's the best way to live.
Yes.
And I think it's good for the team, obviously, too, which obviously is implied. But.
For sure. So what's a moment in your career where you took a risk that really paid off?
Yeah, it's a quick one. This comes to mind straight away. So I was at Disney as a recruiter. And, typically when you're at Disney, you don't leave Disney. It's a great company. And where are you going to go, right? I mean, a lot of great companies out there, but Disney's certainly one of them. I left the job to be the head of HR for a technology startup that just received their Series B funding. And they had no HR function beyond the bare bones. And I had to totally invent the HR function, sort of build it all out, the whole strategy, everything. And my only corporate experience I could speak of was as a recruiter. So I was totally unqualified for the role. But thankfully for me, the CEO of the company was less focused around sort of the length of your resume and more around potential and mindset and some other things. And so that was a risk because it's like very dynamic environment, startup, way in over my head, right? Way over my head. But I ended up within a matter of months, just like being able to figure out so much in such a short period of time, really like cut my teeth around the HR space and organizational development, which is really my forte. And and ended up getting a job right after that at Warner Brothers, which was my dream job at the time as manager of organizational development. And then I was working with the CFO and all these other people, and it was so much fun and so exhilarating. And this was all pretty early in my career, but it all happened because I decided to just basically go hard and just dive into that experience that was kind of wild, but it ended up paying off.
I love that. I'm a startup girl myself.
Oh, yeah?
So yeah, I've done the many startups, but yeah, you learn so much. And like, I love what you said. It's like, I was totally unqualified for the role. I think I can say that about most of the startup roles that I've had, where
Yeah.
it's like, they just believe in you, but you learn so much that you can then take to your
Yeah.
dream job.
Totally, for sure.
Last one. What's one practice or habit that you rely on to keep yourself sharp as a leader?
Get enough sleep.
Ah,
I mean, it's so simple. It's almost silly to say, and maybe it is, but here I am. But get enough sleep, because to me, it's that final 30 minutes, 60 minutes of sleep that's going to determine, do you feel amazing or are you sort of dragging? And if you imagine that over the span of days, weeks, months, and years, that extra 30 to 60 minutes of sleep could really alter the trajectory of your career, and not to mention just your well-being. So I could give you more, but if there's one thing, that's what I'd say.
I think that's amazing, because I know for sure I've worked for people where I'm like, they're so cranky. Like, if only you could like sleep. Like, why are you so tired? Like, why are you so high strung? So yeah, no, I think that's amazing advice.
Yeah.
So I've enjoyed this conversation. Where can
Likewise.
listeners connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Simon A. Taylor. And if they're interested in the book, it's called Build Smart, A Blueprint for Building a High-Performing Organization. It's on Amazon. Got the ebook, audiobook, and paperback there. So
Amazing. And we'll add all of those links in the show notes as well.
okay, great.
Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. It's fun.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.